I wanted to share a love story today. When I ran across this, I said I have to share it with you because so many people always believe that our relationships with white men from the past always comes from rape. That is not true. And I'm going to show you today that's not true. This love story is very interesting, it's very beautiful, it's a little complicated, but I want you all to sit back and watch this clip. It is worth it, okay? Because we're going to discuss it. We're going to discuss this couple, okay, from the 1930's. Y'all, don't spoil it. Don't tell them about it, okay? Excuse me. Now, thank you, Shay. When I heard about this, it made me think of my grandma. This is my grandma, my late grandma. She passed away a few short years ago. Everyone can see my grandma. Okay. Now, what's interesting, thank you, Shay. My grandma, before she passed away, all she could talk about was this white man, one of the loves of her life. Now, my grandma, she told me if she could go back, she wanted to be with him, but she couldn't be. She said because times were different. Now, my grandma, you might not be able to tell, but she has a white father. My great grandma is very dark skinned, like Tika Sumter. So she was on the brown side. She looked kind of Indian, especially when she got older, but more black. She identified as black, one drop rule. Y'all know what it is. And when she went to New York, the man was, oh, thank you, your favorite bed wench. The man was, I think she told me, Italian and Puerto Rican, a mixture of that, I think. And he would always leave her money by the dresser. He would take care of her. And all she talked about when she got older was this man, how she wanted to find him. I mean, my grandma was 80 something, and she said that was like the love of her life. But it was different. No, not Douglas, African American and white. Times were different. So she couldn't be with him. She said, at least not in the South. They wouldn't accept such a thing. The thing is that these relationships have always gone on. Not all from rape. It's just more public these days. Okay? So, I want to share this story because so many people believe, and you won't believe what you hear in this story. They believe that white men didn't like black women. I always thought, how could that be? I mean, if we talk about slavery itself and things that went on throughout the country where they took care of black women, I mean, are people serious? But some people really believe this. So I want you all to sit back before we get into this discussion. I won't tell you what it's about. Just listen and watch this love story right now about this couple.
So here's a question. Which of the Allied countries in World War II, in desperate need of nurses, turned away thousands of qualified patriotic volunteers simply because of their race?
society at large didn't want to see black women in uniform. So a very small number actually served.
And Eleanor Powell was one of them. Like many black nurses in World War II, instead of tending to the wounds of their countrymen, they were assigned to care for German prisoners of war being held in the United States. The Army theorized German soldiers who had been fighting on behalf of a racist regime would not become attracted to women of color. Apparently, Frederick Albert missed the memo.
He said he saw her when she walked in, and it's like he was under a spell.
Frederick and Eleanor became enemies in love.
I think it was youthful rebellion. I think they also were madly in love. But they were taking major risks. I mean, here you are, have an American nurse in the Army, and he's in Hitler's army. So we are enemies at war. So she could have been court-martialed had their romance been discovered.
But now their story has been discovered by journalist Alexis Clark, who spent years documenting this incredible story of courage in a time of war and marriage in a time of hate.
It's a collision of Jim Crow and Nazism. Even though we're at war, these are two countries that have racialized laws. So they both were committing crimes. So you really think about, wow, they erased all of that. And so I think, yes, it was, they're young, they're rebellious, but they also hated what their countries were putting forth and selling this racism, because that's not what were in their hearts either.
Enemies in Love, in this edition of Maryville Talks Books One-on-One with Alexis Clark, presented by Maryville University and Left Bank Books, and media sponsors St. Louis Public Radio 90.7 KWMU and HEC. Well, we are at the Goldfarb School of Nursing for our interview today, which seems an appropriate place for our story, and it's also an appropriate time because this year marks the 70th anniversary of President Harry Truman's move to desegregate the armed forces, and that's certainly something that plays into our story as well. Alexis Clark, welcome to St. Louis. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
Well, the book is terrific. It was a really good, interesting, and fun, fast read. And a lot of stuff in there I didn't know anything about. There's a lot to unpack here, but I just want to start right from the beginning with the subtitle, Enemies in Love, a German POW, a black nurse, and an unlikely romance. I think you're underselling it.
Just a little.
Unlikely? How about unbelievable?
Right, you're right, incredible.
This is incredible. A story of an African-American nurse in the 1940s, World War II, and a German POW, and they became a couple. Amazing. How did you first hear about this story? Well,
so I am very interested in World War II history, but actually I was having just a casual conversation with my mom over dinner, and I discovered I was a distant relative of Colonel Charles Young, and he was the highest ranking African American in the military until his death in 1922. So I just got the bug. I just started reading about blacks in the military. So I stumbled across this book called GI Nightingales, and it was all about the Army Nurse Corps in World War II, and there was a brief chapter on black women who served, and I didn't know that. I knew about the WACs, but I didn't know they were in the Army Nurse Corps. And apparently this author sent out a questionnaire to black nurses. Eleanor Powell, the nurse in my book, responded and included just a little tidbit. It was just one sentence. It said, "The war offers fond memories for Eleanor, who met and later married a German prisoner of war in Arizona." So I'm just like, time out, what?
Wait, what?
Exactly. So I contacted the author. I'm like, what happened? How do I contact her? She's like, I never met her. This is an interesting factoid. So I just knew I had to unpack that history.
Well, you didn't have much to go on to begin with.
I didn't, but Eleanor has unique spelling of her name, and then she also included where she was from, and I knew her age, and I could get the roster of black nurses in the war. So that, as a journalist, I had the papers and some documents, and I just started digging.
There are so many different stories that kind of veer off of this. But starting with Eleanor, she was an exceptional person and in an exceptional position, I think, for her time, because she was living up north in relatively.
They were upwardly mobile African-American family, which was very uncommon. And it's funny, she was from Milton, Massachusetts, which was a very progressive suburb outside of Boston. And Boston, as we know, has had some volatile racial history. But in this conclave, she grew up with white friends, went to white schools, her parents did very well. So she was largely shielded from discrimination growing up.
Until she got into the United States Army.
Until she decided to serve her country. That's when she was confronted with Jim Crow.
That must have just shocked her.
It was very difficult. It was hurtful and humiliating. She had a tough time throughout the Army experience.
And Jim Crow in Arizona, we don't normally think of Arizona when we think of that sort of thing.
I know, and it was pervasive in the South, the Southwest, on the West Coast. So it's not just the Deep South that had segregated facilities. They were actually throughout the United States.
Talk about Frederick a little bit.
So Frederick was born in Germany, but mostly raised in Vienna, and he was from a very wealthy family. And his father served in the Great War, and they were German nationalists. They were believers in Hitler. Frederick, on the other hand, was conscripted. He was not a military guy. He was not a follower of Hitler. He was actually more of a Renaissance man, painter. He loved to cook. He loved to be outside. But he had to be in the Army or face the consequences. So that's what happened.
How did they meet?
It's a great story, really. So apparently, Frederick, his assignment was to work in the mess hall because he was a great cook and an excellent baker. And this is what he shared with his children and his and other family members. He said he saw her when she walked in, and it's like he was under a spell. And then some flirtation started to develop.
Did they have any hesitation about developing this romance from the point of view, from a couple of points of view, really?
Right.
One, I suppose it could be treasonous if somebody found out.
Oh, absolutely.
For Eleanor. And also that eventually the war would end and he would be gone.
I think it was youthful rebellion. I think they also were madly in love. But they were taking major risks. I mean, here you are, have an American nurse in the Army, and he's in Hitler's army. So we are enemies at war. So she could have been court-martialed had their romance been discovered. And also, it's a collision of Jim Crow and Nazism. Even though we're at war, these are two countries that have racialized laws. So they both were committing crimes. So you really think about, wow, they erased all of that. And so I think, yes, it was, they're young, they're rebellious, but they also hated what their countries were putting forth and selling this racism, because that's not what were in their hearts either.
And there probably weren't too many people who had the same experiences, background, attitudes in the Army. The fact that they would find each other is pretty amazing.
I think so too, because they really weren't ever supposed to be with each other when you think about that time period.
Well, really, it's called enemies in love, but they weren't on that level enemies at all. It seems like the enemies were their own countrymen and women.
I agree. Yeah, that's an excellent point. Sure.
A German POW too is not just a question of being prejudiced. I mean, you know, the Aryan master race theory, they were killing people.
Right. Well, that's what was so shocking about this assignment, to put black women in direct contact with German prisoners of war. And what I learned, and this was actually from Eleanor in this previous book, the commanding officer approached her unit and said, "We're shipping you to a German POW camp," because they were concerned with all the fraternization that was taking place between the white nurses and the German POWs. So they said, okay, we'll send in these black nurses, and then there won't be any problems. And so that became an overwhelming assignment for black nurses throughout World War II. They were either taking care of German prisoners or at segregated bases where there were black soldiers.
At one point, there's even a nursing shortage, and the Army won't see their way to.
And that it just shows you how entrenched discrimination and racism was then. So there was an ongoing nursing shortage throughout World War II. And then when you had so many returning American men wounded, there was a threat of a nursing draft. even in January of 1945, FDR, in his State of the Union, says that there might be a nursing draft if we don't get any more volunteers. Meanwhile, thousands of black nurses. On record, there were 9,000 who had applied and their applications were denied. And they had comparable credentials. But this is just where we were, where the American military, and I think society at large, didn't want to see black women in uniform. So a very small number actually served, and that's another big tragedy. There was always a need for hope. And many nurses, long before World War II, tried to be admitted into the Army Nurse Corps. So their desire to be a part of the armed forces and to be patriotic and serve their country started long before World War II. It was just always an uphill battle. But thanks to civil rights groups, thanks to the black press, I mean, thanks to some public outrage, they would always kind of like climb the tree with fingernails, but they got there eventually. But they were subjected to a horrible quota during World War II, and that's why their numbers were so low.
We know that Eleanor was treated poorly by the people in that area. What about Frederick? How were the POWs treated?
Well, that was another part of the history that was shocking to me. So in a lot of the cases, they were treated very well. Actually, compared to blacks in uniforms, they were treated better. I uncovered in some of my archival research, particularly in the NAACP, there are many letters by black soldiers and black nurses. And there's this one particular troubling anecdote. It was in Texas, and it was at a train depot. And the black soldiers couldn't go into the dining room. But the German POWs and their American guards went right into the dining room, sat down, ate, had their cigarettes, and the black soldiers in a U.S. military uniform had their faces pressed to the glass because it was whites only.
So the war ends, and they inevitably are going to be split up when they send Frederick back to Germany. How did they decide to stay back together?
The big secret. Well, again, we're talking about some very young, headstrong people. So believe it or not, they figured, okay, the best way, the smartest way for Frederick to return to the United States is if they conceived a child. And they did. That's exactly what they did. And you really think about that because, wow, that meant she was going to be a single mother impregnated by a German soldier who then has to leave because all the POWs were deported. I mean, that was just part of the law. So she was going to have to return home unwed and pregnant. But they believed in their love, and she was willing to risk that, and that's exactly what happened. And he was able to return a year later, and they married in June 1947, 20 years before the Loving v. Virginia decision.
Where did they marry?
In New York. Courthouse in New York.
About the only place probably at that time.
Well, I mean, yeah, because there were quite a number of states where it was still against the law for blacks and whites to marry, but in New York that wasn't the case, which is why they chose it. They moved to Boston, but they struggled getting housing. No one wanted to give them a lease. He struggled finding employment, just taking odd jobs, and so they knew something was they'd have to make a decision. They couldn't live like this, and they decided to move to Germany since he was groomed to take over his father's lucrative business.
That didn't work out so great either.
No, can you imagine? What could go wrong?
Right, I mean, they were seen, and particularly Eleanor, as I think you make the point in the book, almost like an animal in the zoo,
That's
like
how
some
she
sort
felt.
of curiosity.
People were pointing at her, gawking at her, even some were yelling racial slurs. There was this one moment where she was just walking on a very common street, and this man drops his groceries. It's like his vegetables roll down the street. It's like he's seeing a ghost. He can't believe it because it was so unheard of to have African Americans in some of these German towns, and that's where they moved to a smaller university town. So that didn't go well, and she also she wasn't welcomed by his parents.
Yeah, she had the mother-in-law from hell.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, that was a very difficult year and a half that they were in Germany.
So they came back to the United States.
That's what they did. So they would move. That's the way they made it. So if things got bad, they would just pick up and move. So they started off in the suburbs of Philadelphia. That didn't work out too much. They had to move again. They couldn't enroll their son in the school of their choice because he was black. But then Frederick takes off and goes to baking school, which ends up being a blessing because they keep moving, but after he finishes, he gets a job with Pepperidge Farm in Connecticut. And that's when they start seeing some more stable, a more stable lifestyle.
They had a family, but in addition to the one son, there are other children.
Now they're two. Now they have two sons.
I'm wondering, in the midst of all this, I don't want to sound like Spencer Tracy at the end of Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, but did they give any thought to, what this was going to be like for their children? They had a hard enough time as it was.
Surprisingly, no. And that's some criticism that Chris and Stephen, those are their sons, and even their other relatives, they just thought that they were so naive. And so they didn't even talk about being a mixed race couple. It wasn't a thing. It's almost like they were trying to raise themselves and their whole family in this colorblind bubble. So they didn't address civil rights. They just moved. When things didn't work out and they found out that they weren't welcomed in an environment, they left. They didn't really stick around and fight. And later on in life, that was a problem for their kids who had some identity issues in their teen years.
And when you talk about a bubble, they actually, if there was a bubble out there somewhere, they found it.
They did. They did. They found actually the perfect place just an hour north of New York City in Norwalk, Connecticut. It's called Village Creek. And even in their covenants, they advertised itself as a prejudice-free zone. And so they welcomed mixed-race couples, artists, gays, Jewish families, groups that had been discriminated against. And they found this paradise, and they settled there and lived there until they passed away.
How did you research this? Because most of, obviously the two main characters were no longer with us.
I know.
Was it just talking to family? Were there records someplace?
I spoke to the experts, and then I spoke to relatives, I spoke to neighbors, and then I would do that over the course of a few years.
Now the sons, did you speak to both or only just one?
I met both, of course, but there was really one that I had to rely on because the older son, Stephen, didn't want to be a part of the research. It's too painful for him, surprisingly. I mean, even he's in his 70s now, but he remembers everything and the painful memories, and he just didn't want to go there. I tried so hard to convince him, but it didn't work. So I just had to rely on Chris, who was great.
What's the reaction been to the book? I imagine people are as surprised as you were about just this whole story.
Yes, I mean, it's been great. They're surprised, they're fascinated, they're intrigued. I mean, this is uncovering a lot of history that they didn't know about as well. So that was the goal of this book. And they're also completely in love with Eleanor and Frederick because their story is so unusual.
What was the reaction of the family?
Chris liked it, and that was like the first thing. That's just the son, the younger son. I was so nervous because it can't be easy to have some outsider write about your family, particularly your parents' marriage, because I do get pretty personal in the book. But he said he was in awe of the research and that he liked it, and I was just so relieved by that.
Even having the family members to speak to, were there a lot of questions in your mind that were still unanswered about this, that you couldn't find an answer for, but you tried?
Well, sure. I mean, Eleanor and Frederick were of a generation that really didn't share a lot of their painful moments with their children. I think we're a lot more open now. So there were questions that I thought would have been obvious. I mean, Chris didn't talk about Hitler with his father. I'm thinking to myself, how did you guys not talk about it? But they left painful memories and put them in the past. And that's how they I guess, survived, really. So I had tons of questions, but it's just not there. You know, and I wanted to write a completely nonfiction book, so I didn't want to take liberties of how I thought they would have responded.
You started this book a number of years ago. It took a long time to research, obviously. That said, do you think that the fact that it's coming out now in the times we seem to find ourselves in makes it even more important for people to read this?
I think so. I mean, there is something painfully current about this book. Well, we already know there's a rise of neo-Nazis. I mean, that's going on. You wouldn't really think that, I mean, Nazis would be kind of like a current subject, but it is right here in the United States. So that's unfortunate. I think mixed race couples, we have evolved, but you still have reactions in a population of people who don't approve of that. And I love that this story shows that more than 70 years ago, there are people in this world who are like, no, I'm not going to decide who I'm going to spend the rest of my life with just based on skin color. But that's still, racism is still an issue. So there are themes in this book that we're still grappling with today.
What do you hope people take away from it?
Well, first of all, I hope that they appreciate the history. I hope they are inspired by the story of these courageous Black nurses. And then I also hope that they're inspired by Eleanor and Frederick's courage. I think that there are several themes in this book. They're brave, they're courageous, they're honorable, and even though they move a lot, there are some moments where she, in this one point, where she does talk about discrimination. So I think she's forthcoming in some of her confrontations. So that's important. I think people have to speak up, really. Because if you don't speak up, it's like your silence is to me, a sign of approval.
You are, among other things, a journalism teacher.
Yes.
You've been at this a long time, writing for some very fine magazines, so you know your craft very well. But I'm wondering, having gone through this experience, if you learn some things that you now pass along to your students as a result of having worked on this book.
Sure, sure. I mean, and I stumbled along and made mistakes, but I think the biggest thing is to talk to as many people as possible and always go back to your sources. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I would speak to someone and I just knew to check in a couple of weeks or a couple of months because they would have remembered something. Just like, oh, I forgot to tell you, blah, blah, blah. And that's just really, really stay on top of your sources. That's important.
I noticed on your Twitter feed you call yourself an opinionated Southern belle, I believe was the way it was put.
That's true.
As a journalist, of course, you're not supposed to insert your opinion into a story. Was that difficult for you in doing this book, or did you allow yourself some room to do that?
I tried to really allow this Eleanor and Frederick just gather the information as much as I could. I think I was objective with it, but at the same time, I have no problem saying that I'm against racism. So there's certain times where, you know, I think being opinionated is good. I think it would be a beautiful, compelling story on screen. That is my goal, and I hope that happens soon.
Have you already got it cast in your mind?
That's a fun question. I have some favorites, I do, but I'm open. So I was thinking first for Eleanor, I like Kerry Washington. I also like the actress Condola Rashad. If you watch Billion, she's great. She's also a fantastic Broadway actress. And I was thinking for Frederick, Michael Fassbender, but who knows? I mean, the tricky part is, it's funny. Eleanor was 23 and Frederick was 19 when they met. They were so young, you know, and it's like, I think about what they endured. I automatically put them as older, especially when you think about, gosh, he was in the battlefield at 19, you know. But I think those actors, even though they're old to Eleanor, he looked her in the eyes, smiled, and said with a German accent, "You should know my name. I'm the man who is going to marry you."
Y'all, wasn't that beautiful? You have to respect their courage. For that time period, he's the German soldier. She's the nurse. And how insulting for the government to think, well, you know what? They're sleeping with the white women and we have to stop that. So send some black nurses in, you know, because they're not going to look. I get so sick of that stereotype that white men, no matter where they're from, or men not black, don't look at black women. You even have black men that say this. And since I've been 13, even now, a lot of men not black have hollered at me. They compliment me. They like black women if you look good to them And this shows no matter what the situation, attraction is attraction. The minute he saw her, he was attracted and he pursued her. He didn't give a damn about what he was fighting for. And she didn't, care either. And their love story is amazing. And it just goes to show you, I mean, we already know the deal. We know that's a bunch of bullshit that supposedly they're not attracted to black women. If we look at things throughout slavery, not rape and all of that. But that's pretty amazing. And speaking, yes, white men are still men. And, I don't know what you're talking about, Don Anderson, but anyway. And speaking of the nurses, let me tell you something real quick. Someone I know in the nursing field, back in the day, it didn't take much to be a nurse, but the more black women dominate the nursing field. Caribbean, African, Americans, yes, Filipinos as well, and white women, but black women. Once black women started getting into nursing, that's when they started requiring more and making it harder to get into the program because it's really great money. And I just wanted to let y'all know about that. So they assumed that these German men wouldn't be looking at some of these black women. And he was smitten with her the minute that he saw her. Okay? So yes, Lex with common last name. Okay, so let me see my notes. Okay. Okay, so of course it was controversial being that he was, for the German soldier and everything like that. And she's from Milton, Massachusetts. She grew up in a nice upper class area in a suburb she had white friends and she was sheltered. And he was from a wealthy family, German family. Now, he didn't follow Hitler, but the family did, and he had no choice but to be in the army. But I said before, swirling isn't new. A lot of, yes, always have my notes, Okay, so they had their thing going on in secret, of course. Of course, it wasn't accepted. We have to fight even in 2020 right now for our relationships with white men to be accepted. We still get looks. They still hate. They still want to hate on us when we go out. Get over it. Some of them want us, and some of us want them, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. Okay? You got white women all over the place with black men like I ain't never seen. So get used to seeing us with white men. Accept it, get over it. You're not going to stop us if we want to be with each other. So, and it was a lot. Thank you, Lex. So, it was dangerous during those times. And it's funny because the black men soldiers, they couldn't sit in the dining room. But the enemy, supposedly the Germans, they could. And I, again, question why were black men even in the army if they were so oppressed? So black women did what they had to do. She joined. They had a baby. Now, he was a POW. He was deported, but he kept his promise. He was a man. He came back like he said, and he wiped her up. They had a baby, and he wanted to be back with her. He came back, as you all saw. They traveled. It was a very intense racial climate, 1947. The Lovings were the ones who made it legal to marry. That doesn't mean there weren't any relationships. It just became legal to finally get married. And even though the Lovings made it legal, we still get shit to this day when we're with white men. So she took the leap and she moved to Germany. Now the father, of course, she went through things with the family. They didn't accept it. So they came back to the U.S. So they were fighting for their love. They were fighting for their love. They had their two sons, Chris and Stephen. And they said they didn't speak much about the civil rights. I mean, what was there to really say? I mean, of course, what's going on, but what can you do? That was the world. And some people might think, well, you shouldn't have did it because it was the 50s. They loved each other. They said, F it, we love each other. And it was hard, but they made it work. But their sons were still so traumatized they couldn't speak because of the intense racism that they went through from their parents being together. And I find that to be very, very sad. Thank you, Tinasha. We are women first, entitled to the same protection and privileges as any other woman, period. Own your femininity. Oh, yes. Yes, I identify as a woman first, not black first. You know? So, okay. So the older son, Stephen, is in his 70s, and he's still in pain from the memories of the racism that his parents faced. You know, thank God that word got out about their love story. Thank God that the times are still changing. It's still not where it needs to be, in my opinion. And also, if you want to buy the book, you can buy the book on eBay. It's just $23.94. Enemies in Love, a German POW, a black nurse, and an unlikely romance. Y'all, if black women kept journals, I'm sure they got stories for days of forbidden interracial love. I'm sure. Because remember now, when the Chinese men and the Irish men were building the railroads in California, some of those Chinese men married black women. And that's something not talked about as well. That's not talked about, but it did happen. And I wish they would have kept a journal of those romances and what happened. So when he saw her, he said, you should know my name. I'm the man that's going to marry you. And what did he do? He came back and he married her. He knew what he wanted. He was struck by lightning when he saw her. And they had a romance and a marriage and their children. Okay? So, okay. Okay, I did read a comment under this video, on a different video. A white man said this. He said, what makes people think we can't see the beauty in black women? Are we blind? He would marry her anytime. She was poised. So a white man said, what makes people think we can't see the beauty in some black women? We're not blind. Oh, thank you, B. B says, I met a white guy on Friday. He's a producer and works on commercials. I was on my daily walk, no makeup. He has blue eyes and blonde hair. We're going out next weekend. He has 3 dates planned. Okay. Tell us, keep us updated about it. Okay. So, times I wouldn't necessarily listen. It's always gone down. It's just getting more accepted, not as hush hush. And again, like that white man said, what makes you think we're blind? I say the same thing. Like when I see men not black, I'm like, I have eyes. I can see. I know a fine man when I see one. I haven't been programmed to like one type of feature, one type of race. And I don't know why some people believe this is the case for a number of men not black. Stop trying to speak for men not black. I saw that in the comments section. It's so true. You have a lot of black men who do this. White men don't want to. How the hell do you know, baby? Are you sure? Because I got stories. Not just mine, but other black women I know. I don't understand. I mean, I don't get it. They're trying to convince us this, But we're not going to get into that. Let's keep this positive. But, maybe there were other romances, but this is one. And I really hope that they make a movie out of it. I would definitely watch it. To me, this is amazing because it was a time, the 1930s, the racial climate, and just the fact again that he was a German soldier and she was the black nurse, and they sent them in, and why. And for them to get married, I really hate what they had to go through, moving around all the time, the hatred people had, and finally finding a place in, I think it was New York, where they could settle, where there was some more interracial relationships. But it's a damn shame. It reminds me of when I was dating my Asian man. Every time we would go out, people would stare at us. I'm like, can you just let me live? Can I just be in peace with my damn man? He's not your man. You're not sleeping with him. Stay out of my business. Live your life. It's a damn shame. A lot of people don't want us to be happy. They hate on the black woman. They don't want to see us happy. They think, why did he choose her? And I could look way better, but it doesn't matter the social status of being a black woman. And I'm tired of it. And thank God more of that is changing. More men are getting bold and more men are approaching and all of that. And love won at the end. Love won. And again, I'm happy they found a town where they could finally be in peace. And let's see, he didn't come back and it was a disaster. He kept his word. He didn't make her a baby mama. I know that she was pregnant at first, but that was intentional so he could come back to America or whatever. But he kept his word. He did not leave her destitute with a baby. You know, he came back and then he tried to make it work, bringing her to his wealthy family, you know. So to me, for that time, this is a lot of courage. This is bravery to me for both of them to do what they did and to say F it to everyone in the world. I mean, there were other interracial, believe me, it happened, but it wasn't as commonly known. And, you know, it reminds me also, one of the first guys to tell me he liked me. This was in the 90s when I was young. He told me he liked me. He was from a European country, and I didn't know what to do. I froze up when he finally told me he liked me, because even back then in the 90s, it wasn't as accepted. And we were kids, and I just was nervous. And he grew up to be so gorgeous when I saw him in high school later. And I always regretted I didn't say anything to him, but it happens. It's not as taboo, and it happens. The attraction. And you have a lot more black women, not a lot, but a few like me, that are coming forth admitting our attractions. That is not force, that is not out of anger, but that is natural for us. So, and just like he had his natural attraction to her, when he saw her, he knew what he wanted. He thought she was beautiful. And a lot of people would never have thought something like this had gone down in the 1930s. So I am so happy to bring you all this story, this love story. I want to hear what you're saying in the comment section as well. I want you to get those likes up. And yes, Vanetta and your favorite bedwench, people are still butthurt when we date them. I know a woman just the other day, she has a white man. It's funny because a white woman, she has a black man and a child. But when she saw her with her white man, she gave her the death stare. And she has a half black baby herself, this white woman. They don't all like it. Some of these white women, they think they can come and dip and dabble with the black man. But when we come over there, all of a sudden, they want to roll their eyes. They want to stare. They think, they get all upset. Why? You got a half black baby. Did you really think some of us wasn't going to dib and dabble with your men and take you, well, I wouldn't say take them, but get wiped up by the white man? Is happening more and more every year. And society is going to accept it and get over it. And I hope to see the increase so that people can chill, stop staring at us, stop bothering us, and get over the fact that he is choosing the black woman. Because a number of them can see our beauty, just like he saw her beauty. And I know this story is going to ruffle some feathers. There are going to be some haters, but there are probably going to be people in shock because they probably thought, what? 1930s? It is what it is. So, okay, your favorite bedwench says, can I talk about the Lovings? I might talk about them. I know there was a film done on their love story. And, I'm so happy to bring this story to you again. I've been waiting to share this because when I heard about it, I was so amazed. So amazed. Okay? So, yes, Kissed by Hypergamy. Let some people hate. It's only going to increase the way it's been increasing. You think Brad and Tom could really resist some of this black beauty? They can't resist some of them. The different skin tones, the full lips, the almond eyes, the high cheekbones, the curvy bodies, the thick bodies, the skinny bodies. the fashion, the confidence, and just the attraction. They're not going to deny it anymore, and they're not. And it's about time. Brad and Tom, we've been looking too. I just thought you should know that. I remember again in high school, this white guy I used to sit behind, I used to stare at him. He was so cute to me, and he had no damn clue I was checking him out every day in class, just thinking about him. So, yeah. And it's the same for a number of white men, believe me when I tell you that. So, that's all I want to say. Thank you, Sunny Day. I'm not married yet, and I don't have any kids yet. I do want them, and I do want that. Rocket Man. I just need to tell y'all, white men, and I will be having some live calls regarding this issue. Okay, because a lot of white men, y'all have no idea some of us are looking at you. Fine. You think I don't have eyes? Some of us can see. Not all of us are brainwashed and programmed to just only want the black man. That's a bunch of bull crap, and it has been for years. Just a lot of them don't have the courage to publicly say it. They don't want to, upset the black community and all that other bull crap. I remember, trust me, we look, and they look too. So, that's all I will say for now. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Bye. Leave your comments below about this amazing love story. Bye, Rocket Man. Bye, everyone.